Hello and welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Nicole and today I'm going to be sharing with you some books that I recently hauled. So I think I said in my last haul that I was going to just go alphabetically through my bookshelf, but I decided that I don't quite want to do that, and the reason is that I really want to focus on specific books that I hauled. Anyway, let me go ahead and get with the first book, and that is a work of horror, and this one you probably have heard of, and that would be Our Share of the Night. This is a book that I have been seeing going around for, I feel like, a good year or so, but I personally wasn't particularly interested in it. I don't read a lot of horror. I have noticed that most people will comment that it's not like your just typical horror novel, but they haven't really added anything to that conversation that had made me want to pick it up. And then I was talking to someone I know locally, and she was talking about her experience of reading this book and her thoughts on it, and it was so different than what anything I had heard that I was immediately like, I want to read this book. Now, granted, I know she read it in Spanish, so that may partially be why she had a very different take on it, because sometimes things really do get lost in translation. But I'm hoping that's not the case. Now, do I recall what she said about the book that made me so interested that I went out and bought it? No, no, not at all. But I can ask her again, and I'm sure she will tell me. Anyway, I'm not going to get into what this book is about, or at least what it says on the back, because that's not what intrigued me about it. So I'll just go ahead and skip to reading the opening of the book to you, and maybe that will be enough to get you interested in reading this book. It says, there was so much light that morning, and the sky was so clear, its warm blue marred by a single white smirch, more like a plume of smoke than a cloud. It was already late, and he needed to go, and that hot day was going to be just like the next. If it rained, and he was hit with the river's humidity and the stifling Buenos Aires heat, he would never be able to leave the city. So already enjoying the writing style, and I'm very curious to see what my thoughts are about this book by the time I actually get to it and once I'm done reading it. I also purchased a few works of science fiction, and again, a couple of them I feel like are pretty well known, and some of them are not. The first one is Wild Seed by Octavia E. Butler. This is the first book in the Patternist series. I'm at the point where I basically just want to read everything that she's written, and I happened to find this at a used bookstore, and it is in gorgeous condition. So knowing that I want to read everything she's ever written, it felt like a good time to at least pick up the first book in the series. Again, because I plan on just reading everything she's written, and I also find that Octavia E. Butler's books are somewhat similar in themes. I'm not going to read the back of this book because I personally don't want to know much more about what it's about, but I will read the opening of this to you yet again. In fact, that's not true because I already read the opening paragraph, and there's enough things in there that I'm pretty sure YouTube won't let me read it out loud to you, so let's just go ahead and go with the back of the book. Okay, so according to the back of this book, it is about a being, shall we say, named Doro, who is an ancient spirit. He doesn't know of any other spirit that's more powerful than he is, or anything that has more authority than he does, and he has innumerable powers, but he needs to possess humans, so I'm assuming that that's the only way for him to show up in a body form. And he just spends his time jumping from body to body, possessing different people, and is basically seeing his life as just being a lonely eternity of sort of breeding supernatural people, possessing them, having them obey his every desire, so on and so forth. And he fears no one until one day he meets someone like himself. And we'll just go with that. It sounds interesting. I think there's supposed to be a bit of a love story going on in this book, but I've also heard it gets really, really weird. And I'm not surprised. Like I've read enough about I've read enough Octavia Butler at this point to know that like her sci-fi can get kind of on the weird side in terms of, yeah, just stuff. And the next book that I got is The Wall. This is another one, like I said, that I feel like you hear a lot about, especially on BookTube, and just in general, it's become very popular in the last few years. Though from what I recall, it's not a recent publish. Yeah, this was originally published in 1968, but has had a resurgence of sorts. And it's about a woman who goes to a cabin in the woods to visit or go on vacation, I think, with some friends. And she wakes up the next morning and finds that she's alone at the cabin, and the cabin is surrounded by an invisible wall, and she is stuck there with maybe a cow and like a cat or something like that. And so the story goes on, and it's about isolation, being removed from society, and how you're kind of forced to confront your own internal conflicts during that time period. That is my guess. I'm looking forward to reading it. I don't recall what finally made me go, yeah, Nicole, pick it up, but I have decided to finally pick it up. And the opening says, "Today, the 5th of November, I shall begin my report. I shall set everything down as precisely as I can, but I don't even know if today really is the 5th of November. Over the course of the past winter, I've lost track of a few days. I can't even say what day of the week it is, but I don't think that's very important. All I have to rely on is a few meager jottings. Meager because I never expected to write this report, and I'm afraid that much that I remember will be different from my real experiences." Okay, next I'm going to get into some books that I feel like start to cross various genres, and I don't know quite where to put them, but I'm going to leave them in just the science fiction fantasy blend, and you can decide which category you think it belongs to. But the first one is Moonbound by Robin Sloan. This came out, I believe, just last year in 2024. Yep, that's correct. And this is about a young boy named Ariel, or Ariel. I don't know how you would say that. And he lives in a remote village that is under a wizard's rule, which is what might make you think that this is fantasy, but it goes on, and he is basically going to find himself needing to save the world, and there's going to be some girl unknown, there's going to be challenges from enemies, there's apparently dragons, and then there's also a sentient artificial intelligence, and that person becomes his ally as well as the narrator of the book, and thus you can see why I feel like this is a genre blend and have no idea where to actually categorize it. Other than it does seem like it is a combination of science fiction and fantasy, and we'll read the first paragraph of the prologue. "Success came first, wicked problems finally put to rest, after which the Anth, A-N-T-H, for that is what humans called their civilization at its apex, applied themselves eagerly to the extension of good health, the invention of new arts, and the speed of light." So starting out solidly sounding science fiction, but I know there's an ancient civilization somehow involved in here and some fantasy sounding things. I'm looking at the dates that's occurring in a later chapter, and that is in the far, 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 far future. So it will be really interesting to see how this book goes. I forgot how I heard about it, but I'm pretty sure it was on a sci-fi channel somewhere at some point when I was looking up something. So we'll see how that one goes. I also have a book that apparently is more well known in some niche of the fantasy world, I believe, and that is the Tatami Galaxy. I have never heard of this book until just this year, but I was excited to see that it's been out for a while and that it is a completed series, which I don't know why I'm excited about that because I don't really read series, or all of them anyway. But this first came out in 2008, and it follows a young college student who goes through 4 parallel realities to explore what might have been and what should never be, which is something that I discovered recently. I really like the idea of. I recently read The Archives of Unknown Universes, and that had a bit of the idea of going and looking at parallel universes, but didn't explore it in depth. And I really wanted something that did more of that. And thus I somehow came across this book. So I'm really hoping that it scratches that itch, if you will. And it opens saying, "Let's just say I accomplished absolutely nothing during the 2 years leading up to the spring of my junior year in college. Every move I made in my quest to become an able participant in society, to associate wholesomely with members of the opposite sex, to devote myself to my studies, to temper my flesh, somehow missed its mark. I ended up making all sorts of moves, as if on purpose, that need not have been made at all, to isolate myself from the opposite sex, to abandon my studies, to allow my flesh to deteriorate. How did that happen?" Yeah, I feel like same girl, same. Anyway, I'm looking forward to this. It should be interesting. I love the cover, and I've heard that this is a very popular series, and hopefully it will be for me as well. And the last book I have here in this category, again, I guess would be sci-fi dystopian, but it is a classic, so I feel like it therefore doesn't really get categorized as anything. It is definitely a more modern classic, published in 1974, and that is The Hearing Trumpet. Now, this is a work that I occasionally hear about here and there randomly, and the people who read it seem to really like it, and it's been on my TBR for a while, so I was happy to pick it up more recently. And the back of this book, what is this about? I'm just going to read it to you because I don't think there's any other way to summarize this. The novel begins in the bourgeois comfort of a residential corner of a Mexican city and ends with a man-made apocalypse that promises to usher in the Earth's rebirth. In between, we are swept off to a most curious old age home run by a self-improvement cult and drawn several centuries back in time with a cross-dressing abbess who is on a quest to restore the Holy Grail to its rightful owner, the goddess Venus. Guiding us is one of the most unexpected heroines in 20th century literature, a nonagenarian vegetarian named Marion Leatherby, who, as Olga Tokarczuk writes in her afterword, is hard of hearing but full of life. And this is blurbed by some very interesting people on the back of it, including Ali Smith. And the afterword, as it mentioned in the on the back, is written by Olga Tokarczuk. I'm pretty sure I've said her name wrong twice now. I am fascinated by all of this, particularly the hard of hearing but full of life Agenarian vegetarian, or I'm sorry, non-Agenarian vegetarian. And the opening says, when Carmela gave me the present of a hearing trumpet, she may have foreseen some of the consequences. Carmela is not what I would call malicious. She just happens to have a curious sense of humor. The trumpet was certainly a fine specimen of its kind, without being really modern. It was, however, exceptionally pretty, being encrusted with silver and mother-o'-pearl motives, and grandly curved like a buffalo's horn. The aesthetic presence of this object was not its only quality. The trumpet magnified sound to such a degree that ordinary conversation became quite audible, even to my ears. You interested yet? I don't know. I am. Now I'm going to move into what I feel like or think is predominantly literary fiction, though again, some of them are some older works, some of them are more recently published, and I'm going to start with Cautery? How do you say these words? I'm going to have to look these up. This was published in 2022 and is put out by Charco Press, which you can probably tell if you're familiar with their books. They all have a very similar vibe. This is a book that just sounds endlessly fascinating in its premise and the topics that it explores. And it starts out by saying on the back that the difficulty of being a woman in the 21st century Barcelona and 17th century Massachusetts might only be 400 years. And this discusses two different women, one who, sure enough, lives in 21st century Barcelona, and the other one who lives in 17th century Massachusetts. And it goes through a look at both of their marriages, and one is facing an apocalypse, and the other one is a disappointed wife, and explores their lives, I'm guessing, by going back and forth between them, which just seems really odd and crazy. It is supposed to be a funny book, and it's supposed to indict what it says are the cheap consolations of memeified faux feminism, misplaced solidarity, and sacrifices for the supposed greater good. And these two women share a final vision of true happiness, which looks like burning it all down and beginning again. So it'll be really interesting to see how that works out. And I'm realizing that this cover, the way they have it designed, is the two women. Ooh, I like that. On a bit of a dystopian type of vibe, even though technically I'm in literary fiction, I picked up The Colony. This is a book that I saw earlier this year was coming out and went, very tempting. This talks about Emily, who is burnt out from her demanding job, and she leaves town, goes into the country, and there comes across a peaceful woods and a mysterious group of people who live there. They've formed their own colony, if you will, or commune, and she ends up trying to explore, like, how did they end up here? What are they doing? Does she want to be part of this group? Is it something that she feels like she needs to escape? And yeah, it's supposed to be unforgettable characters and sharp social commentary, as it says in here. I am looking forward to this. I love the idea about a book about like communes or cults and like sort of social misfits, if you will, and people like whether they are social misfits or whether they're the wise ones or who knows what. Oh, I just realized I didn't read you the opening of this one. and then I'll read you the opening of the colony. And this begins, for a long time, all I want to do is unalive myself. It doesn't say unalive. Uh, hmm, hmm. Okay, how much of that will YouTube let me keep in without, like, flagging me? I don't know. We'll find out. All right, so the opening of the colony begins. There were 7 of them in the group. They came from higher up, the main road, perhaps. Now they were sauntering down the path, not looking at the ground as they walked, as if the soles of their feet already knew the placement of the roots. They were men and women. Some looked young, and a few middle-aged, or older, 50, 60. They walked one after another in line onto the little path they turned, the one that led to the lake. It was morning. Ooh, we get the colony straight from the beginning, and I love the ant on the cover. Next, I was going to say I have a little book, but it's definitely not a little book. It's a chunky book, and that would be Life a User's Manual. And this is a book that really intrigued me when I heard about it because it's a concept that, if well done, I think I'm going to love, and if not well done, I think it's going to drive me nuts. Let me tell you what this is about. So, it is basically taking place over the course of a single day, or really, I guess, a single moment in time. And that time is 8 p.m. on June 23rd in 1975. And it is a series of intertwined or interconnected stories. Each chapter unlocks a new mystery because apparently there is some connected thread through all of these stories about what's going on, but it is about an apartment building, and I believe each chapter is like a different, or each section of the book is a different apartment in the building, and we go through them one at a time and we revisit them, and eventually a whole story comes together. Sometimes that works for me, sometimes it's drawn out too long. I'm pretty sure what it depends on is whether or not it's making sense from the start. Like, I don't need everything revealed at the start. I just need enough of an opening at a start to kind of place myself. And then I tend to like to feel the interconnectedness the entire time. And each of the stories needs to be good. So I've got a lot of demands on this book. We'll see if it works out. I've heard good things about this book, but then again, I feel like I've also heard good things about books that have very similar setups. I don't know. We'll find out together. I'm going to start with chapter 1. And chapter 1 begins, yes, it could begin this way, right here, just like that, in a rather slow and ponderous way, in this neutral place that belongs to all and to none, where people pass by almost without seeing each other, where the life of the building regularly and distantly resounds. What happens behind the flat's heavy doors can most often be perceived only through those fragmented echoes, those splinters, remnants, shadows, those first moves or incidents or accidents that happen in what are called the common areas. Soft little sounds damped by the red woolen carpet, embryos of communal life which never go further than the landing. And chapter 1, I should mention, is called On the Stairs. So I'm guessing in this book we start on the stairs and they're giving the explanation as to why. And yeah, it's definitely going to be sort of a more maximalist writing style, but so far I really like it. And it's not crazy. Like, there are some long paragraphs, there's definitely some long sentences, but it seems like it's going to flow and move pretty well. The margins in here are a pretty decent size, despite the fact that this is 661 pages. I do think it's going to read fairly quickly, I think. And this was published in 1978. So, again, another modern classic, or at least what I would consider a modern classic. Did I tell you when The Colony was published? I didn't. First published in 2023. This was first published in 2022. I have another book that has been on my TBR for an extremely long time, and that is Lolly Willowes by Sylvia Townsend Warner. I think, own 3 books by her and have yet to read a single one. I don't realize that it's her books that I keep picking up. I just happen to really like the premise of her books, but now that I'm realizing I have quite a few by her, I really need to read 1 or 2 of them to make sure I actually like her writing style. Because otherwise there's going to be a whole bunch of books all at one time that I feel like aren't going to work well for me. But I have the feeling that's not going to be the case with this. This was first published in 1926 and also has a really intriguing premise. And from what I recall, this book has a bit of magical realism in it. At least that's what I saw somewhere. I don't know how true that is, but it follows the story of a woman who I believe her name is Lolly Willowes, and she is trying to break away from her controlling family. If I also recall correctly, I believe she is basically considered a spinster during her time period. Who knows what age that actually makes her? But she is kind of done with the family that she is with and the idea that, to be satisfied with life, she has to be married. This opens and says when her father died, Laura Willowes went to live in London with her elder brother and his family. Of course, said Carolyn, you will come to us. But it will upset all your plans. It will give you so much trouble. Are you sure you really want me? Oh dear, yes. I think the real question she needed to ask is she really going to want them? And the question, I'm guessing, is answered with a resounding no. Published in 1959, I have a work of Japanese literature, and this is The Wild Geese. And it is considered a modern classic and apparently is the source material for the film The Mistress. And this is supposed to be a story of like unrequited love against the background of social change that occurred in Japan at the fall of the regime. And the young heroine is Atama, and she is forced into poverty and becomes a moneylender's mistress and tells the story of her life, her struggles with her weak-willed father, with the moneylender, his wife, and then the guy who she is secretly in love with and wants to be with. I'm really looking forward to this book. I don't remember how this originally got on my TBR, but it's a short little thing, and it's put out by Tuttle, and I really enjoy all of their work. There we go. And yeah, I'm looking, it's also on the front, like I could have just shown that. Anyway, I'm really looking getting forward to getting to this. I'm realizing that I have a lot of Japanese and Chinese classics and modern classics on my shelf, and that somehow over the last year or so, I've gotten very distracted from them and haven't read a lot of them. And I really am hoping to change that soon. I don't know if that'll happen by the end of this year, but that's certainly going to be a goal or a plan that I have for next year. And then I have two final books, both of which I feel like fall into historical fiction, which I guess technically this did as well, even though I didn't get into that. Oh, and I also didn't get into the first page of this book, so let's do that. Chapter 1. This story happened long ago, but by chance I remember that it occurred in 1880, the 13th year of Emperor Meiji's reign. That date comes back to me so precisely because at the time I lodged in the Kamijo, a boarding house which was just opposite the Iron Gate of Tokyo University, and because my room was right next to that of the hero of the story. When a fire broke out inside the house in the 14th year of Meiji, I was one of those who lost all of their possessions when the Kamijo burned to the ground. What I'm going to put down, I remember took place just 1 year before that disaster. Ooh, wonder if somebody set the fire. Into the next book, that would be Kintu, and this is a work that again I think I found out about because it was a like bookstore recommendation at one of my favorite bookstores in town, and it was first published in 2014 in Kenya. It is now considered, I think, a modern Kenyan classic, and it is a multi-layered narrative that reimagines the history of Uganda through the cursed bloodline of the Kintu family. It's divided into it is divided into six sections and begins in 1750 when Kintu Kida sets out for the capital to pledge allegiance to the new leader of Baganda Kingdom. And this is, as I recall, supposed to be a multi-generational family curse story, and sounds like a lot of things that I will be really into. And the person who recommended it at the bookstore, like not to me personally, there was just a sign, really sold me on this book. And we'll start in book one, chapter one. There is a bit of a prologue or something of that nature, but I feel like that's never a good feel for how a book is going to be. So I will share chapter one of book one. It was odd, the relief Kintu felt as he stepped out of his house. A long and perilous journey lay ahead. At the end of the journey was a royal storm. The princes had been fighting for the throne again, and weapons had not yet been put away. He could be carried back, his head severed from his soldiers. Commoners tended to lose their heads when royals fought. Yet Kintu Kida, Papukino of Buddha, Papukino of Papukino of Badudu province was glad to step away from his home. I will put those words up on the screen, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing things in these videos, but when you first start reading something, it's kind of hard to know how to pronounce all the things. I'll probably see if I can get that book on audiobook because that will definitely help me, at least initially, start to learn how to say some of the words. The next and last book that I have is another work of historical fiction. Did I mention we were on historical fiction yet? Anyway, that book is Fayne by Anne-Marie MacDonald. I'm kind of surprised that I haven't heard more about this book on BookTube because I feel like at least at one point she was a fairly popular author. She is the author, if you weren't sure, of Fall on Your Knees. That's the one that I'm familiar with, and I think I have that on my bookshelf. Maybe not. I can see my F's right now, and I don't see it up there. But I have read that book and recall really enjoying it. And so I was surprised when she came out with a more recent book that I wasn't hearing more people talk about it. But again, I don't watch a ton of historical fiction channels, so maybe more people are talking about this. This was published in 2022. I love this cover and the colors on it, and it's a nice, thick, chunky book, which I recall feeling like Fall on Your Knees was as well, but this one is almost 800 pages. So, this is a book that feels like it's going to be full of atmosphere and mystery and kind of harken back to Jane Eyre with a bit of secret garden action going on. And let me tell you why. This book is supposed to follow a young woman named Charlotte Bell who is growing up in the late 19th century on the border between England and Scotland. And she has been basically kept isolated on this estate by her father because she has a mysterious illness or condition, which is always like red flag. Like, no, you don't, girl. Like, run, run. But either way, she grows up and really enjoys her home life. She knows that her Irish American mother passed away in giving birth to her, and that she had an older sister, but that older sister died when she was 2. Thus, it's just her and her father. But as she grows up and becomes more curious, her father eventually agrees to get her a tutor and gives the tutor the instruction to teach her as he would if she was a son, whatever that means to him at that time. But as Charlotte starts to learn more and sort of become more educated through the help of the tutor, and they begin to explore the estate and the grounds in the bog, she uncovers an artifact. At which point she begins to question more things with her father. Her father announces that he's going to cure her of the condition she's had her whole life or get her cured, and her world goes upside down. Like, what doesn't sound mysterious and fascinating about that? Like, family secrets, atmosphere, foggy vibes. I hope this is as good as I've made it up to be in my mind. And there's some interesting formatting going on in the beginning already. So this is going to be interesting. It sounds like she's going to be very into science and the like, and like I really want to know, like, what is this mysterious condition that your father's been telling you you have? Clearly, you don't have enough like mystery family drama books in your life where you'd realize that there's something wrong with your being stuck at this estate with dad. Anyway, that is the last book I have to share with you today as I continue my journey of sharing with you all the books that I've secretly hauled at some point this year. So you have more to look forward to as the year goes on. I'll be trying to put out one of these videos each month. Um, yeah, because I have hauled a lot of books this year and have kind of really gotten behind on sharing them with you. I'm not on a book buying ban now, but do know that like I'm currently not really buying any books unless it's something I'm reading immediately. These are to have for later. So here they are, everything that I recently hauled. Let me know if you've read any of these books and enjoyed them, and let me know if there's any that you're now interested in reading, and I'll talk to you next time.